And welcome back to Frankly Speaking in conjunction with May He Rain. Joining me on the line tonight is my good friend Julien DeMarco. My friend, happy Easter, brother. How you doing?
Happy Easter to you and to everyone. I'm doing well.
All right. Well, fantastic. Glad to hear that. And listen, this is kind of an impromptu kind of a cast night. Julien called me, said he has something on his mind about this Russia, Ukraine, and I guess the media and the youths of America here, Julien. Why don't you get off your mind what you got to say?
Well, I feel like there seems to be a massive one-sided indoctrination about this Ukraine ordeal, especially when it comes to the youth. Now, I primarily deal a lot with youth I am youthful. I'm young, but I'm not like a teenager. But I deal with a lot of teenagers because of my job. I'm a restaurant manager, and we have a lot of teenagers that work there. And hearing them talk about this Ukraine situation, they're all for Zelensky, all in. And Putin's a dictator, and Zelensky is the hero, and Ukraine should become more Western. And what is also very interesting is that I've run into some Ukrainian youths. I would say they're second generation. Their parents are first generation, so they're not too far removed from Ukraine. They've actually been over there. And they're all for like westernizing Ukraine and for Zelensky, and and I'm like saying, okay, well, Putin told Ukraine not to do these certain things, and they did it anyway. And so Putin is defending his interest. And then they'll say, oh, well, Putin can't say, well, Ukraine can't do this because he has no power to do so. Yes and no. That's just like the United States telling Mexico they can't do this. And if they did this, we'd go in there too and make them undo it by force if necessary. We do it all the time. And then they'll try and say, oh, well, just because the US does it doesn't make it right that Russia can do it. And I'm like, you're right. But the fact is, you cannot say that Zelensky's all on the up and up and then Putin's somehow bad when it has since this war or this invasion of Ukraine or whatever, however the media wants to spin it in Ukraine's favor, started. It's come to light that Zelensky, he's not all that good. Actually, he might actually be worse. And not only that, he's a puppet. And he wants to be a puppet of the West. The thing is, I try to explain to some of these people about what happened in 2014, and it's just like they didn't understand what was going on. And I literally said to one of the Ukrainian people, you do realize that in 2014 there was a coup. And it was like, no, there wasn't. It was okay, so tell me how it wasn't a coup. Well, then at that point, I said, well, we have to actually stop talking because this is a place of business and we shouldn't have politics. Yeah. But it's stuff like this that really, I guess, grinds my gears, is this lockstep of young people, younger than me, that is just so... They just regurgitate everything that is just the current moment.
Well, Julien, what I will say is that that's what, generally speaking, young people are. They regurgitate what they've heard. I think it's a situation where, listen, the Democratic Party in particular, the leftists, the communists have always targeted the youth. It's why they do these, get out the vote drives for youth, because they're inexperienced in life. They're young. immature, have very little experience to draw from, and they are the demographic that's probably the most easily manipulated. And that's always been the key to democracy and why elites always grab power, tyrannical power in a democracy, precisely because they can capture certain demographics, the youth being one of them. We've talked about in the show many times the terrible damage universal suffrage has done, and universal suffrage was passed precisely for the manipulation of the vote so elite can control and gain power. The funny thing to me is the kind of more we move on as a nation, and being in the classical liberal right-wing camp that I was for many years, and the classical liberals worry about tyrannical leaders all over the world. Putin, for example, is one that they claim is KGB, tyrannical, sort of dictatorial leader, right? It's funny because to me, in America, it seems like we're becoming a very top-heavy government where it dictates from the bottom down. The concept of we the people is clearly disappearing. Now, the right will tell us, right, that we got to fight, we got to take back America. I can't tell you how many times I heard that phrase with this classical liberal camp. We got to take back America. And that in itself, the phrase in itself, is an admission of defeat. That in many ways, classical liberalism has lent itself and lent the nation and its people to the progressive left without no answer to regulate back to the right. What you are experiencing at your workplace and dealing with young people is that immaturity, that inexperience, and really a propaganda machine coming from the mainstream media designed to propagandize. It seems to me like we have American Pravda now at this point in history. Julian, I saw a meme that summed it up beautifully. Whenever you turn on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, you're not to look at them like journalists. We're to look at them like paid actors and actresses, because that's what we're seeing on television, and this is what the youth is getting.
Oh yeah, indeed. I think, but also to save myself some stress, I probably shouldn't be talking about politics with a 17-year-old who doesn't know
Yeah,
who doesn't know anything.
yeah, yeah,
that was my first mistake.
Yeah, but see what the thing is here is that 17-year-old will be voting in the next election, and that 17-year-old is gonna mitigate or take away or rob you of your vote. See, this is the problem that I have with this whole idea of democracy and we the people. I'm 50 years old, and the only thing I've ever experienced in my life by having the right to vote, the right to self-determination, like so many classical liberals tell me, is my sort of my gift or my prize that I have in the society, is that my neighbor to my left, my neighbor to my right, and my neighbor across the street from me, they all go to the polls and gang up against me and really overthrow all the values that I've ever loved and cherished. Everything that is beautiful in this world, everything that I hold dear and sacred has been robbed from me, not from some tyrannical dictator who's going to come down with this pound of flesh, but rather by my neighbors, by my disordered neighbors that go to the polls, Julian, to rob me of what I believe in, Julian.
Charles, Charles Coulomb said it best, I think. Democracy is, I'm trying to try, I can't, I'm not going to try and say it in, his pithy way, but I'm going to try and at least say, he said democracy is the tyrannicalness of the minority that vote, because the majority of people don't actually vote. So
yeah, it's a minority that votes. Yeah, I know. So it's a difficult one. And so listen, as far as this, Ukraine and Russia thing over there, we did a cast on it where I lightly touched on it. I'm always hesitant to discuss foreign policy, mainly because oftentimes I'm not there. I don't know the nuances of a lot of the foreign policy issues. But through my life experiences, for example, the Iraq War, I believe we were misled in that one. And the same propaganda machine that was telling me that we had yellow cake and weapons of mass destruction and how Saddam Hussein was so evil that he was throwing people into paper shredders are now telling me that Putin is the most evil dictator in the history of the world. Okay, I don't know if that's the case.
Throwing people in paper shredders.
Yes, I heard that back in the day. Yes.
That has to be one giant paper shredder.
Yeah, apparently it is. I don't know. That's what I heard back in the days. And I was, at the time, a supporter of the Iraq War. As a Republican, young conservative, I thought we, spreading freedom and democracy at the time was the key, right? And so in that sense, the propaganda machine, whenever wars come, you have to get the people on your side. You have to consolidate, right? The ideological vision. And like we do so often in democracies, we paint the enemy as the greatest villain ever while we paint ourselves in the light of truth and goodness and all this stuff. And it's funny, Julian, because listen, I keep saying it. I don't know what Putin is. I have no idea if he's a good guy, if he's a bad guy, if he thinks he's Charlemagne, if he's a madman. I have no idea. But here's what I can tell you. I think as Americans, we are the ones that first and foremost need to look ourselves in the mirror first and foremost. We have endorsed, legislated, funded, celebrated, and shipped overseas every mortal sin ever condemned by sacred tradition and our ancestors. We are the epitome of evil if we're willing to be honest. And before we go trouncing around the world of who's evil, this guy, bad guy, this guy, the bad guy, we got to correct our own problems here as we got a nation that's ready to go to war with one another. Julian.
Well, America really never, it's as old as time, or at least as old as politics. When you're not doing well domestically, you either get yourself in a foreign war or you insert yourself in some foreign thing that has nothing to do with you and take the spotlight off of your domestic policy. If you've noticed, prior to this whole Ukraine thing, 46 was doing terrible in the polls. He was a complete and utter buffoon, and he still is. And he was a disaster. But then this thing happened in Ukraine, and then all of a sudden, overnight, his poll numbers go up, which typically, I don't know what it is in human nature, especially in this Enlightenment type of politics, in Republican politics. But for some odd reason, people just lose all their brain cells when a war is on, and then all of a sudden it just, the president, he was like at 4%, now he's at 30%. It's like, that doesn't take away from all of the stupid stuff he did before this war was on, and it has absolutely nothing to do with us anyway.
Yeah.
So why should his poll numbers be good? And we're also, inflation is out of the roof.
Yeah.
Because his predecessor, who he served under as vice president, did everything and anything to bring about what is happening now. This is what is commonly called the chickens coming home to roost.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the problem is, and what I resent is the idea that all of our values are determined by this right here, a show of hands. And it's something that as a Catholic I struggle with, especially as an Italian, because the way we look at, truth and error, it ultimately comes from God. Obviously, there's some issues of governance there that are very important, right? We have to govern our human affairs. But once you begin to deviate away from ultimate truth in the name of let's start campaigning. Let's see how many votes we can get to kind of tip the issues in our favor. And now we start overturning thousands of years, not only of tradition, but of God's laws at the whim of politics and democracy, because minority groups are demanding they want their rights, or else they're going to burn down the entire system. Well, I don't know if that's a right way to govern any civilization, and that's where we're at right now. And that's why we're
that
seeing
is not the right. That is not a good. That is as idiotic can be.
Yeah,
we are completely upending not just 2,000 years of Christian tradition, but just humanity in general.
Yeah,
we are becoming unhuman. We are becoming more barbarian than the barbarians.
Yep. That's right. And all because there are minorities that demand that they want what they want, or they're going to burn down the entire system. And listen, most Americans, and I've said this before, despite my critiques of America and some of its principles, I love this country. It's a nation, that I was born in, a nation I was raised in, a nation I'm raising a family in. It's a nation I'm going to die in. This is my country. But I think for a lot of us, we're confused about where we're going. And, we've been sold this bill of goods from classical liberals that politics is the answer. Get out there and vote. That's what we got to do, because that's the answer to everything in America. It's how like I said, it's how we determine right and wrong, good and evil, right? And then we every June, every summer in the month of June, I think is what it is. We got those reporters standing at the top of the Supreme Court building, waiting for the big decisions from the secular Supreme Court, a bunch of political appointees, ironically enough. And here they come running down the steps like they're Moses, with a big decision to overturn the laws of God, Julien, right? And here we are, right? In America, we have thousands of years of tradition in regards to things like marriage and contraception and, lust and divorce and remarriage, all these issues that were the prerogative of the church for thousands of years, even going back to the Old Covenant. These were prerogatives of God and his church, not any government. No king would have ever stepped on a lot of these rules. I mean, the one that did was, I guess, King Henry, that started the Protestant revolt, and we could talk about that. But here comes democracy and liberalism and the will of the people, and all of a sudden, we get to rewrite and redefine the laws of God and make ourselves God, because that's what the Supreme Court is now at this point here. When you rewrite the laws just on marriage, for example, those are the prerogatives of the church, not a bunch of secular political appointees, Julien.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I left you speechless.
It's funny because, that does happen every June. There seems to be some landmark decision that's just...
That's overturning the word of God every year. It's amazing to watch, and nobody picks up on this, right? Now, I get it. In America, we have religious liberty, right? We have Glenn Beck and Kirk Cameron covenant theology, where you kind of take a piece of paper, you write down your promises to God, you hang it up on your wall, and that's your covenant with God. We make it up as we go along because we've never taken religion seriously. And then when we undo thousands of years of sacred tradition, we like to add the God bless America thing at the end of every presidential speech or the song or whatever it is. It's like we've undone everything God ever dictated to us. And then we say, God bless America. It's like we're mocking God at the same time while claiming we believe in him.
Right. So I want to ask you this, Frank, seeing as you were a classical liberal Republican.
Yes.
What are the plans if for some odd reason, a miracle was to happen, and, we get another Reagan, and, and it's just nothing but red, and all 50 states are Republican, and the president is Republican, and it's like that for like 12 years. What is the game plan? Essentially, what I'm asking is, if conservatives get everything they want, what's stopping all of this from being undone? Because we are in a system that has universal suffrage. We are in a system where almost everything is voted. I mean, right down to your local dog catcher.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the game plan for stopping if the Republicans get everything they want on their wish list? And
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Meghan McCain Republicans and
Right.
I'm talking about Ronald Reagan Republicans,
Yeah.
maybe even more conservative than that, and they
Well,
get it. And so, what's the game plan to stopping all of this from being overturned?
that's a great question because we got to define what conservatism is, and conservatism in many respects has changed. It's reacted to sort of our times and our deteriorating social standing within our local communities. And so, pick your choice of who had it right? Edmund Burke and who do you have? That one guy, Will. I forgot what his name now, but you have some historical conservatives throughout the years that kind of laid out what conservatism was. Reagan would probably be included in that. The problem has been, though, is that conservatives have surrendered on social policies and have become de facto libertarians in many respects. I said it on one of my most recent podcasts. The moment the Republicans went after Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky affair in the mid to late 90s, and a president screwing around with an inferior employee, somebody that's underneath him, being a married man, and the American people's response was, well, we don't care if he's screwing his secretary. We don't care if he's a married man having an infidelity affair. The economy's great. As long as he does a good job as president, that's all that matters. And that was really the moment the Republican Party said, whoa, okay, the Christian right, the silent majority, it's all dead now. We can't pursue any social policies unless it's poll tested, right? So we get into the 2000s with George W. Bush, and at the time, the first decade of the 2000s, right, gay marriage, the American people were still against it. And George Bush in 2004 put, at least that administration, the Republicans, picked selective key battleground states where they put anti-gay marriage amendments on those states like California, for example, right? There was about, I think, 8 to 10, anti-gay marriage bills at the proposition level, at the state level, and they used that to get George W. Bush reelected in 2004. But as soon as Obama gets in, and for some reason the LGBT issue really begins to favor the left, we've seen the collapse of that. You're asking me what conservatives believe in. What is the game plan? Economic prosperity. Let's go out there and make the money in America, because if we make good money, right, strong families come from a situation where you have strong economies. If you have weak economies, you have weak families. If you make the money, that's all that matters in America.
But that's not true. Historically and statistically, that's not true. And you don't even have to look historically. You can look at the modern world today. I mean, countries, whether it be Africa or Asia, there are lots of places where they are not doing so well financially, but they have strong families. There are also lots of countries that are doing well financially, and they do have lots of families, and they are strong families. But those wealthy countries that have big families that are financially strong are far and few and in between. The more wealthy a country is, the less they are able to replace themselves. They have less kids. They have less people in them. So that economic, theory, I guess that's what it could be called. That if you have a strong economy, you can have strong, stable families. That's just not true in the reality on the ground situation.
Yeah. Ultimately, because the right in America has never believed in true religion, right? We have this concept of religious liberty, this religious indifferentism. It's difficult for them to relate a lot of the families back to, again, the apostasy and the spiritual effects and the social effects on the family. So whenever you hear a conservative argue about the breakdown of the family that you mentioned now, they would tell you it's an economic inequality. It's an economic problem, right? I was listening to, for example, Thomas Sowell the other day talking about the Black family. And his argument is that subsidizing single motherhood destroyed the Black family in America starting in the 1960s. These are arguments. You see, there's another libertarian author, I believe his name is Charles Murray, same kind of line, libertarian thinker. We were doing fine in the 40s and 50s. America was booming. Big families, making the money, Levittown, we're moving on up. And then all of a sudden, here comes the war on poverty with Lyndon Johnson. We start subsidizing single motherhood, and hence that's what's responsible for destroying the family. If we just get everybody working again and don't incentivize single motherhood and other social factors, the family would be repaired. That's their argument.
I think that is a I think that that is true. What they're saying is true. That is a huge contributing factor to the breakdown of Black families, families in general. And if you take that away, there is no incentive to keep having kids out of wedlock. The government is incentivizing to have kids out of wedlock, and that a man does not have to stay around and be responsible for his kids. But there's also that issue is just one issue that destroyed the Black families and just families in general in this country. It's not the be all end all, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, here's my problem with the argument. Everything we just talked about started in the 1960s. That was really the moment the sexual revolution reached its high peak. And libertarians never want to deal with that issue. You can argue that the breakdown of family happened because we subsidized single motherhood, possibly. I think there's an economic argument to be made there. But you can also argue that the breakdown of the family has happened as faith, true faith, has broken down in America. It's like Charles Colomb said on our last show. Remember, really for the first, 100 years or so in America, the one thing why it worked kind of was because Jews and Catholics and Protestants shared common values. But as the nuttiness of religious liberty really kicked in, and we begin to see the fracturing and the splintering of Protestantism, and in many respects, Catholicism too, we begin to see the breakdown of the family because the faith is dying. I mean, listen, you can argue that single motherhood in the Black community starting in 1960 destroyed the Black family, but what's happened to the white community ever since, right? Whites are struggling. And I'm talking about affluent whites are struggling with divorce rates, abortion rates, a single parenthood. It's like I was telling you on my previous show, when I was going to school as a kid, as a grammar school kid, and middle school and high school, most of the breakdown of the family that I saw came from Protestant families. The Catholic families, at least those immigrants that just got off the boat, were rock solid, steady. But as liberalism creeped in, those families began to break down. Let's be honest. We got Elvis shaking his hips. We got the birth control pill being made over the counter, abortion, pornography, disordered life. I mean, you name it, everything, all these social mores that were once condemned by sacred tradition were normalized in America, Julian.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I love me some Elvis, but I think it's nostalgic and innocent that Elvis Presley, some of his performances were censored because of his hips. But I mean, now we got people like Nicki Minaj half naked on TV.
I know.
I mean, I wish we could go back to the day when all we had to worry about was a man shaking his hips. I think we'd be all right.
I agree with you. It's amazing to me. One of the things me and my wife love to do is we love to watch these 4K walkthroughs of Europe, right? We watch, of course, Italy, Switzerland. We watch Greece. We watch Spain. And if you ever see these kind of 4K walkthroughs, they're just kind of walking down the street, high definition, right? And they go to the beach areas, and all the girls have the thongs now. All of them. There's no shame left anymore anywhere. It's quite remarkable to see. And that's my point. You can make the economic argument. I could give it some validity, but can you give some validity to the other side that we've had a great apostasy kick in that's been maybe even more responsible for destroying the family? But the libertarians won't do that because they don't want to get into the area of religion, Julian. It's off hands in America, religion.
Exactly. I think to go back just a little bit, you talked about Burke, Edmund Burke.
Yes.
I think so. He was for the American Revolution, the so-called American Revolution, but he was vehemently against the French Revolution. He actually has a book about the French Revolution, and so Edmund Burke is also he's also considered to be like one of the grandfathers of the modern Tory party, the modern High Tory party in England. Right. Because conservatism in England is different than conservatism in America, because you can be a conservative, but you also can be a royalist a monarchist, if you will, a royalist. So also just a little language education here. A royalist and a monarchist are one and the same, but also one means something else. A royalist is somebody that lives in a country that already has a royal family, and therefore they are a royalist because they support the royal family. And by default, they are also a monarchist. Okay. A monarchist is somebody that does not necessarily, they can and they cannot live in a country where they have a monarchy, but they're not necessarily a royalist in the sense that they don't have a royal family to owe allegiance to.
Yeah.
But that's so I would say that Burke and Reagan would be slightly different, but also they would align on something.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately there's not one defined ideology of conservatism in America. It's really a broad tent, right? And because democracy in and of itself demands so many votes from so many demographics, the Republican Party always had their broad tent. Let's bring everybody in, right? Kind of a thing. Okay, we'll bring in the log cabin gay Republicans. We'll bring in the libertarians. We'll bring in the social cons. We'll bring in, the blue blood Republicans. We gotta beat the socials. We gotta beat the communists, which is the Democratic Party, right? That's the idea. But when you bring all these various groups into one big tent, you sell your soul ultimately, Julian. That's what happens. And if you look at it, what the Republican has sold is social issues and really the family in America. And what they've consolidated under now is let's go out there and make the money. Let's build the economic engine of prosperity in America. Let's make all these great goods and services all over the world. We'll spread freedom. We'll spread liberty. We'll spread comforts and pleasures. The whole world will love us, Julian, and we all get to live in luxury and just live the good life, a way of life our ancestors could never dream of, because we are Americans, Julian.
Listen to what you just said. That's basically how somebody that's basically been a Democrat all his life was able to become the Republican president. Trump.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I liked some of the stuff that Trump did, and I obviously liked him more than Obama. But what you just described is how somebody like Trump can be a Republican president.
Mm-hmm. Because
what is there really to be? What is it? What is a Republican? What is a conservative? It doesn't mean anything. I think it is much easier to explain a Democrat and what they're trying to do than what a Republican is trying to do.
Well, see,
because
let me just say this real quick. You bring a good point, because what was Donald Trump? He was a businessman. He wasn't going to touch the social issues, right? I mean, Donald Trump was photographed and seen holding up a rainbow flag, right? That's the big tent, right? Let's forget about the social issues. Let's focus on economics. We got the businessman. Let's balance the budget. Let's get this economy rocking and rolling. Jobs, 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 and GDP numbers. That's every presidential debate. Listen to it. Every presidential debate is jobs, 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 GDP numbers, and some social issue that's being trounced on in America. That's what every debate is. Watch.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's always about jobs.
No
But
talk about
again,
natural law. No talk about destruction of the family. None of that. No. No talk about faith and religion and how it applies to our daily lives. Nothing. Nothing.
but I still don't understand. What I don't seem to understand is why is it the government's job to talk about jobs? That's not their job.
Because it's grown so big now. See, this is the irony of it all. Okay? The irony of it all is we founded a revolution based off the principle of small government. Now, where did the concept of small government, aka subsidiarity, come from? It came from the Catholic world. Catholics practice subsidiarity. But the irony is here, right after the revolution, government starts to grow immediately in America. That's the irony. We've never seen government actually be small. You can say, well, okay, at the founding, it was small. Yeah, but it began on a leftward trajectory to grow and grab more power immediately. And it never regulates back.
Also, another thing, what our founding fathers, and all this small government, that's basically saying that Britain had a big government, which it didn't.
No, I know, but it had a monarch.
So I don't understand.
But he's a monarch.
What are they trying to say? What are they trying to do? We want a small government. Well, how is the government in Britain any different? How is it enormous? I mean, Parliament didn't constantly sit all the time. They had 666 people in Parliament. A first minister, also known as the prime minister, and the king that ran the government.
Yeah, but the king wasn't elected. The will of the people, man. Julian, why do you hate freedom so much, man?
But I also don't understand what freedom are you talking about? Because when I always hear, conservatives or Democrats or whatever say freedom, well, what do you mean? Because people in the 1800s, they were free. They weren't slaves. If you hear the way that people talk about freedom and liberty, you think that everybody everywhere was in chains, and only in the 1700s did America have a slave revolt and then build a free country. That humanity would not have survived if for thousands of years we were all slaves.
But what happens when the king comes for your land and for your daughters?
Well, that doesn't happen, but you do realize that if that happens, you do have recourse.
Where's the recourse?
The recourse is you call up your bannermen and you revolt against the king.
So now you believe in revolution against the king?
No, I'm just saying that a king can't just go willy-nilly and do things. First off, all the land in the kingdom is the king's, hence why it's called the kingdom. And if he comes up and wants your land, he has to pay you for it. He can't just seize it.
Yeah.
He has to compensate you for it. Mm-hmm. And when he gives you land, he gives it to you in perpetuity. It is your land and you can do whatever you want. See, in America, there really is, there is no such thing as lodial I think that's the legal term for it, lodial property. That means you are the owner and the owner forever and whoever your descendants are, and nobody and nothing failing your whole entire line being wiped out or a meteor coming or whatever can take it from you.
Right. Right.
In this country, if you default on your
Loan.
on your loans, the bank can seize your land, it can seize your property.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and if you own your house outright, if the government if you fail to pay your taxes, even if you're not paying a mortgage, the government can still come and seize your property.
Right. Right. Well, let me say this to you, Julie, because this is something I've been thinking about lately, particularly with this current, let's call it housing boom, or is it really a land grab by elites? What do we have right now? Because as somebody who believes in private property, I don't know what we have in this system. Yes, you can buy a piece of property that has your name on it, but that doesn't mean you have private property rights. Like you said, if you default on your loan, the bank come take it. If you don't pay your property taxes, the government come take it. And because we've had now the manipulation of money by bankers and elites, is it really private property when it's unaffordable for most people? And think of the kind of homes we've been shoved in America over the past 60, 70 years. They have no utilitarian use whatsoever. They're a place to rest your head at night. You get up in the morning and back to the employee-based usury system you go to pay a mortgage on that house. My question is here, Julian, the current housing situation in America, the way we distribute, never mind land, but even housing, it seems to me it was designed for banks more than people to live in. I said it once, I said it again, if you don't have your land, you don't have true freedom. The political right sold us on this. You got to go out there and make the money in America, climb the corporate ladder, the economic engine of prosperity. If you make the money, you can buy anything you want, do anything you want. You can be the king of your own world. Well, now we learned that the elites are manipulating the money, Julian. How's that freedom? See, when you have your land and it's yours, it doesn't matter if the dollar inflates or deflates, or if inflation or deflation, if the economy it collapses, it's your land. You live on it, you grow your food, you raise your cattle, you start a business, you do what you want. We're not dependent on these elites in faraway technocratic land like Washington, D.C. to tell us how much we're supposed to earn, what our cost of living is, what we're expected to make in order to survive, in order to get to retirement and have so much money. It's a bunch of BS, Julian. We don't, for a nation that claims private property rights, how many of us actually own any land? How many of us actually own anything tangible other than a few little gizmos that keep our minds occupied, Julian?
Yeah, I mean, the houses are ugly. The lot of land that they give us is small, insufficient. It really, and if you want anything of size, you have to go far out. That means you either have to commute 2 hours to work, or you have to try and get a remote job, which not all of us have a luxury to do.
We've been pushed into the cities. That's bottom line. Yeah. And you can't have the farms in the cities. It has to be more of a service-based economy in the cities. That's what it is. But the problem is, Julian, is the land has become expensive everywhere you go. And, relatively speaking, I guess you can still go to the Midwest, right? But even that is expensive for out there, considering what the job base. All I'm saying is it's funny because I'm not sure private property in America is actually a reality. Everything is financed through banks, right? Our cars, our houses, everything that we do. Most Americans are living in debt. Most Americans are not even making ends meet. And this is even before the Joe Biden inflation kicked in, Julian. So I'm just not sure where we're going right now as a nation. And I believe this is why people are angry, confused. They work hard, they work a lifetime, and at the end of their lives, they have virtually nothing. I mean, you could tell me you have $1.2 million in your 401k, and God bless you if you got there. But I'll give you an example. My father didn't live to the age of 62. He died at 61. He never collected. He never got to live that dream. And if you're telling me that the ultimate goal is put $200 a month away in a 401k plan for 40 years, Julian, at 10% interest at market value, and you retire 1.5 or $1.7 million, my immediate question is, okay, first of all, am I alive at 62nd? And second of all, how many viable years do I have left at the age of 67? I just think it's crazy the kind of economy we structured, that we work from birth to death, to have so little at the end of our lives.
Oh yeah, it's very, very tragic. It's very sad. I mean, also another thing that is, I've been reading a lot of financial books and things, and I've sent you some of these things.
Yeah.
This country is very financially illiterate, and it's meant to be that way by the banks and by those in power.
Yeah.
Because they don't want you to be financially literate, because if you're financially literate, you can make better financial decisions to actually be able to make yourself financially free.
Yeah, but also, Julian, also because they want you to constantly spend money. That's why it's a buyer's economy, right? Everything is premised on the consumer constantly buying. That's how this economy works. We're a service sector economy. We have no, again, manufacturing anymore in this country. If Americans don't spend money constantly, this economy collapses.
Yeah, I mean, that's very, I always thought that was a dumb idea. It's just like, there's only so much stuff you can buy. And if somebody stops spending money, well, then I don't have any money. You don't have any money. Nobody has any money. So that's not a very good way to, I feel, have an economy, because we've seen what happens to countries where the primary economy is this, and when it collapses, it really collapses.
Yeah, it's what we've done, Julian. We're a big corporation society now. They dominate. They've consolidated the means of production. They've consolidated the land. While people are all worried about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, we have oligarchs buying up all the farmland in America. That's a bigger problem, Julian. That's a massive problem. Nobody wants to talk about, right? Because we've been convinced we want the 8-bedroom house in suburbia America, right? Granted, we only have 1 kid per household now, but we need 8 bedrooms, Julian. Okay. We got to have our SUVs in the driveway, our 75-inch TVs. We got to have the granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. We're living the good life in suburbia, man. That's what we want in America. We've been sold that as the American dream, and yet we look around. The chickens are coming home to roost now. All this fake, phony money that we've been spending for generations, inflation's here, and it's here for a reason. My friend, your final thoughts for the night, wherever you want to go.
I think the fake, phony money, it has come home to roost. We don't even have real banks anymore. For example, Ally Bank.
Right.
It's 100% digital bank. They have no brick and mortar. So
if the internet goes down, you can't get your money.
You cannot get your money. I really feel that this whole dependence on the digitalness, if you will, of our world, it's really going to set a lot of people up and a lot of countries for failure. As I said before, somebody can just hit the button, and it goes off. And that's the same with the fake money as well. I mean, so to stay on I'll just finish this. Staying on the money, it's backed by the United States government.
Mm-hmm.
If the United States government falls, our money is worthless.
Yeah.
One thing about having real gold, actual real currency, if the government falls, you still it's my money's still worth something.
Yeah, I get it, Julian. I mean, that's what a lot of us have been arguing for a long time, but it's inconvenient, and there's forces out there don't want to link to gold. For whatever reasons, it's an easier way to manipulate money, and when you can manipulate money, you can manipulate the land of the brave and the free. That's what you can do. And it's funny because the more I look around, the more I see less and less of free America, and really a propagandized, brainwashed America. I think oftentimes we've built up this mythos in America that we're the greatest thing in the history of the world, and certainly America has some great traits. But as we've seen over the past 40, 50, 60 years, something has gone wrong. And Americans, I think they're lost in the midst of this. I think they've been brainwashed. I think the concept of freedom and liberty is, we've been brainwashed to believe that we're free, Julian, when in fact we're manipulated at every turn, and most Americans have not seen what's coming down the pipe. My friend Julien DeMarco, thank you for joining me tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank again my friend Julien DeMarco for joining me. Broad conversation, great conversation tonight. Always enjoy his company. This is Frank signing off for Frankly Speaking in conjunction with May He Reign. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.